What is going on, world? Welcome back to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Joined today with me is a special guest, and I know I say special, but when I got the therapist in the building, I try to get the information that they're gonna charge for tomorrow. So please introduce yourself. I don't like to miss a credential. I don't like to miss a title that you worked hard for. Please let the people know who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Reg. So my name is Kresence Campbell. I'm an LPC psychotherapist, certified family trauma therapist as well. I don't tell everybody that, but I am a certified family trauma therapist, owner and operator of Holly Street Counseling. I've had my private practice for about 6 years. We just went full-time private practice last February. So we're about a little over into a year full-time, working with women to understand the psychology behind self-care and understanding how trauma impacts self-care, what parenting styles looks like with self-care, how shame and guilt and all that impacts self-care, because quite often we think self-care from a superficial standpoint, but it's more than that. It's from a mental health standpoint, a financial standpoint, a physical standpoint. So helping Black women understand the importance of that and take away the shame and guilt that is associated with self-care that we're often taught.
Yes, no, and I love that you started that way because I think with the rise of mental health and people caring about it, some of the therapeutic techniques, and mind you, I'm going back and learning. I'm in school now, so I'm learning all of it now. Some of those therapeutic techniques have got lost in what self-care looked like. So being the expert that you are, can you talk about some of the things people aren't discussing when they're talking about self-care?
One of the things that people aren't discussing is trauma and how that impacts self-care. I have people that come in all the time, oh, I have no trauma, I have no trauma. And they start telling me their story. And I'm like, yo, you have trauma.
Mm.
But people aren't talking about it because we don't know what it looks like, because too often we associate trauma with the combat vet, right? Or somebody that was in an abusive relationship. And it doesn't mean that those things are not trauma. They are trauma, but trauma can be being on the SEPTA bus and getting hit. And for you, that's traumatic, right? Everybody's trauma is going to look different. Sometimes we normalize trauma and think it's okay. You might normally live in a traumatic environment and that's your norm, but it doesn't mean it's healthy and it doesn't mean it's okay. But because we normalize trauma in our communities, oftentimes it becomes undiagnosed.
Wow. So now that it begs me to think, because some of us come from certain environments where trauma is normalized, can we even really truly heal if the community that we're going to continue to breed more and more people is going to continue to keep happening going forward? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not impossible. It's hard. It's doable, but it's not impossible. Um, I personally have not seen someone be able to heal in a traumatic environment, right? When I say that, maybe you are living in an environment where there's a lot of gun violence and you're trying to heal from the trauma of that gun violence, but you're still going home at night and you're still hearing gunshots outside. It's difficult to heal in that environment. In those moments, it's more so trying to help you find ways to cope while you're living in that environment till you can get out of that environment. Lots of times people can't afford to do it from a financial aspect. They don't have the ability to just get up and move. So when it's like trying to build a plane and fly it at the same time. Is it impossible? No, but it's hard. It's
Mm.
hard as hell.
Talk to me about, you said it, like coping in an environment that is harming at the same time while you're trying to heal. What's the difference between, or make the connection between coping and healing?
Mm. I think coping is when you're just trying to make do. Right? I think coping is when you're just trying to make it feel a little bit lighter, a little bit more manageable, a little bit easier. When you're healing, it's not about just trying to push through each day. It's being able to look at the whole entire event list of events from a holistic standpoint and be able to pinpoint certain things that bothered you, certain things that triggered you, where the trauma began, where the trauma ended. When you're in it, you can't really pinpoint where it started, where it ended, because it didn't end. You're just trying to get through it. It's almost like if you're in a car and you have a flat tire, you have to just push through till you can get that flat fixed or till you can get to the mechanic. And once you're at the mechanic, he can then fix the tire. Once you're out of the traumatic environment, then you can begin to heal. So it's going to look a lot different. Healing is when you're out of the environment. Coping is when you're still in the environment, trying to be as healthy, as safe as possible.
I hope you know that's a clip right there. That's a clip that's going out on social media. And that will be, again, I say it, y'all gonna charge for this tomorrow. So I try to get it and then put it out there just so as a bite-sized taste of like, all right, if I pay for it, if she's giving this out for free, imagine if I pay for it, what I could get.
Imagine what it's like when you get the whole meal.
Yes, yes, yes. So I appreciate that. So a little bit of my story of I'm right now. I started this podcast before I went to school, so I knew I wanted to heal, and part of the healing was starting this podcast, right? And that's 2018. So now I'm in the space where I'm going to Drexel. I'm learning. I'm in behavioral health, so I'm backtracking to like kind of put the glue together to all of the things that I was already doing. For yourself, did you always know, and I'm at that age where I'm in millennial, where trying to figure out, was this what I was supposed to be this what I seen when I was a kid, like that's what I want to be when I get older? And I asked that to you, like, is this who Kristins wanted to be when she got older?
No, I knew I
Mm,
wanted to do something helping people. So I wanted to be like a scientist, an astronaut, all these scientific things. I wanted to understand why things work the way they work. So I was the kid in the house that was taking stuff apart and trying to put it back together, putting all the mixing stuff together and making stuff blow up in the house because I wanted to understand the molecules and the particles and all that kind of stuff. And as I got older, I kind of pulled away from science. I was like, oh, this is too hard. I don't want to do it. But I still wanted to help people, but I still needed to understand why things work the way they work. It wasn't until after I graduated undergrad and I was working as a special teacher.
special
I
needs
was working
assistant.
in a thank you. I was an assistant for autistic support classroom. And I had to go in early, do an early shift. And I had two young girls in the hallway that had a conflict. And long story short, I was able to help them with conflict management. And I was like, in that moment, I want to be a therapist. I
Mm,
want to help people resolve things. And then I started thinking about, I want to understand why people do certain things. And all that science part came back to me, right? I want to understand what makes people tick. I want to understand why, you cry when you see a certain color. I want to understand why people talk in a certain kind of tone. And then it all came to me. Be a therapist, understand the mind, understand how all of these things add up and it result in what you see in front of you. But it also has pushed me further to remind myself, oh, you're not done. We're going to go back and get that doctorate so we can
mm.
understand even more past what we understand now.
It sounds like a journey. One for the reason why I knew what you were trying to say, because my wife does that, like now, and now she's on a journey. And mind you, this was maybe about a week or two ago, where it's like she worked with special needs. It's like she still care about that specific population, but she also went back to school and was like, you know what, let me get the degree and finish it and do my undergrad or whatever the case may be. But now as she's doing, it's like, you know what, I think I might be a counselor for kids because I want to
Mhm.
understand why they think of the way they think or things like that. So it's funny how them things traject out over time, where it's like it started this way, but you said you was the kid that was pulling apart things. Now you're pulling apart people and trying to put them together.
There we go. That's exactly what it is. See how it all comes full circle?
So now you switch into that and you decide that, all right, I'm going to go to school to be a counselor, and then you go get the doctorate. How does one transition to becoming the self-care expert and do all that? Because that's an aspect of, is anything you could have chose what to do with your degrees. Now you be like, you're like, now I'm going to focus, like you niche down into mothers and women and working on self-care. Like, how did you find your path into that?
I found my path into that in 2016. 6 months after I had my daughter, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And the first time I had an issue with it, it was after a day where I thought I was self caring. Ran 3 miles, went to the gym, worked out, doing all these things to keep my temple healthy. And long story short, I ended up having complete paralysis of my right side. And when they finally figured out what it was, the doctor said to me, you have to take care of yourself. And I was like, I self care. I drink my green juice. I run and all this. And I remember this man pushed away from the desk and spun around his little swivel chair. And he said, oh, no, it's much more to it than that. And it was in that moment I said, oh, I really haven't been taking care of myself because I'm running 3 miles knowing daggone well my knee hurts. I'm emotionally keeping everything inside of me and not speaking up. And while I'm sitting here trying to let everybody slide with things, I'm staying stuck in an emotional jail, not realizing that's not taking care of myself. I'm sitting here thinking I'm taking care of myself, but I'm in debt financially. I don't even understand what self care is from a holistic standpoint. And it was at that moment I said, you know what? I need other women to understand. I need other brown and Black women to understand what self-care really is. We don't always have good examples of self-care, whether it's our moms, our aunties, or whatever. We are almost, a part of me feels like there is a racial part to this, right? The racial, the racial trauma behind Black women not even being allowed to take a minute to themselves, us having to be breastfeed the slave master's baby and all these things. You're taught to be quiet and put everybody else's needs in front of you. And the minute that you say something, it's, oh, well, grandmom didn't do anything for herself. Mom didn't do anything for herself. You'll be okay. No, I'm not okay. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what? I love everybody in this household, but I need to put me first. I love you, but I can't give you that money. I love you, but I will not allow you to speak to me that way. I'm going to set these boundaries. That's a part of self-care. And I wanted us to all understand this as we are starting to come into this environment where therapy is becoming normalized. Therapy is okay. Okay, therapy is normalized. Therapy is okay. What are we going to do now? We're going to understand the barriers and the things that are stopping us from healing and interrupting us. And self-care is one of the biggest aspects. It's not just about lashes and toes and massages. It's about all those different areas I talked about.
No, and you bring up an important point as far as just like self-care having a version that looks like for everyone, and them doing it in their own way, and how you thought you were doing self-care, but knowing what it was, the backlash of it would be. Where does one start? I'm thinking about the mother that agrees with everything you're saying, or the woman that agrees everything that you're saying, but the way that they have structured their life, um it sounds like I'm flipping my whole world over at this point, like doing something totally different. How did you even start the process of like, all right, I've been doing this one thing or these things this way this whole time, then you got diagnosed? What's the first things you start doing to like implement some of the new strategies?
I started looking at different areas in my life that I really wasn't happy with, and trying to understand, am I not happy because I'm just not happy, or am I not am I unhappy because it's not serving me, right? So how do I feel when I do certain things? If I'm tired and it's 10 o'clock at night, why am I sitting here cleaning a toilet? Am I cleaning a toilet because I feel like I'm obligated to do this as a wife? Or am I cleaning a toilet because I feel like I really need to get this done? A lot of the things I was doing it out of obligation, out of the idea of what a good mom is or a good wife is. I didn't want to figure out, I didn't want to be that good wife, good mom. I wanted to be what was good for me. So I had to start doing a lot of self-exploration, right? Am I doing this to meet the need of my own? Or am I doing this to meet the need of other people? And if I'm doing it to meet the need of other people, how is this serving me? Because sometimes we like to do things to make other people happy, and that's good. But is that coming out of a healthy, functional place? Or is that coming out of an unhealthy, dysfunctional place, right? So am I people pleasing? Is that why I'm trying to make this person happy? Well, why are you people pleasing? Is there fear behind this? Is there fear behind, if I don't clean this toilet, my husband's going to be mad and then divorce me? Because our thoughts will start to go. So I really had to start thinking about the things you're doing each day in your life. Are you doing it because you feel obligated to meet a certain standard? Or are you doing it because you want to meet your own standard?
Mm.
Who's it for?
It's a good quote, and I know somebody is touching their heartstrings right now. And I didn't want to skip past it, but you spoke on earlier about being diagnosed with MS, and as I don't hear many people talk about it within the community, especially the Black community, and how they affect us. And I think that's a lot of the things that are starting to get unpacked with as people grow more comfortable with therapy and talking about mental health, but these different micro struggles within the struggle and how they're impacting us differently. Can you talk more about that, being diagnosed with MS? And even I know, and I'm going off for a little bit on a tangent, but I know having that diagnosis, it causes like you need more sunlight, you know what I mean, and or you need certain things that if you being diagnosed with that in a certain environment, that you can't get those different strategies and treatments that you need. How does one deal with that? You get what I mean?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed in 2016, December 2016. I had my daughter in February 2016. So February 2016, I had my baby girl. In June 2016 is when I had that first relapse, when I was telling you I had the right side paralysis. December 2016 is when I got my official diagnosis after having a spinal tap. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. My family, we all kind of the name MS was kind of lingering for months before I got the official diagnosis, but we were all scared because unfortunately, people in our community don't talk about this. People in our community are not represented. You know, for a long time, we were like, that's a white person disease, but it's not. It's more common than we think. So I had the diagnosis in 2016. I went on a very mild form of treatment. And then November 2017, we found that the treatment wasn't working and my lesions had more than doubled. So all of my lesions that I have currently are on the left frontal part of my brain. So it impacts all the things that the left frontal part of your brain that it controls, it impacts all of those things. Sometimes my speech, coordination, ability to use logic and things like that are impacted from all of that. And what MS does is it attacks your body, it attacks your immune system. So if you have a cord, our nerves have something that's called Millith. I might be mispronouncing it, but basically the cord has a covering and the MS attacks the covering. And you know, when the covering comes off, what's exposed? The wires. And when the wires are exposed, that's not good. So that's what happens. MS attacks the nerves, and then it causes basically like scarring, either on the brain or the spinal cord. So I went from 4 to 14 in less than a year. So we quickly had to amp up my medication. Now, during this time, I'm trying to have these conversations with my family. Nobody wants to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it out of guilt because I'm seeing the pain that my family is dealing with. You know, I just recently started being more open about it because I just started to really accept what it was, because it's a scary thing. It's something that's not curable. It does lead to disability, but the medications that they give it to you because they want to slow down the possibility of disability and the progression of it. Does it look the same for everybody? No. You have some people that have MS that are in wheelchairs, use walkers. You have some people that lose sight. Everything's going to be different for everybody, but it's important to make sure that you get on these medications ASAP. And for me, I've been on medication for a long time, to the point that I've been doing so well that I get to take a break from it for a little bit, which I'm really excited. For 3 years, I was on an infusion treatment medication where I would have to go into an infusion center, same place where people go and get chemo and sit for hours on a drip and get medication put into my body. And when I tell you, emotionally and psychologically, I broke down every time. Because in my day-to-day, I can ignore it, right? I have the pains and, you know, the symptoms of whatever, that's fine. But having to go and having to have somebody put something in your arm and you have to sit there and look at the other people, it forces you to see this is what your reality is. On the inside, you're not as good as you think you are. So for me, self-care, I have to keep my mental together, because if I don't, it triggers my symptoms for my MS. Stress-free is something that I have to be to the fullest extent. Is it easy? No. Do I get stressed? Absolutely. But I have to listen to my body. You know, people will say everybody has the same 24 hours, and if you go to sleep early, you don't want it. No. I want to live. So I go to sleep by a certain time. Yeah, we all have 24 hours, but your 24 hours looks different from my 24 hours. I would feel guilty of, I need to take a nap. I need to lay down. Why do you feel guilty? You need to take care of yourself, but I got to do this. I got to do that. No, you have to take care of you first. And through understanding, am I doing this out of obligation or need? And understanding how much I loved myself and rediscovering myself, I was able to start managing my MS a lot better. I was able to start falling back in love with myself a lot better. It took away the guilt. I lost a lot of the shame. And that's why I'm able to talk about it so easily today. My family, I was trying to protect them and all of that. And I had to remind myself, that's not your job to protect them. That's not your job to not speak to them about it. Because if you don't tell them about it, you don't tell them what's going on with you, then they worry. So give them the information and let them do what they please moving forward. But it wasn't until I started doing this healing journey and improving my self-care that I was able to improve my MS and have these candid conversations.
You're in and thank you for sharing that. You're in an interesting position and that centers, and I would love to hear your perspective as a healer, because you are a counselor, like spiritual counselor, and you are also a mother, then you're also a woman, and how you juggle with fulfilling the duties that you want, that you feel like your child needs. That it's that nature, that nurturing feeling that you have with your connection, but also having enough self-care and resources as a therapist to say, I can literally harm myself trying to take care of this child, without taking care of myself. Can you talk about that? Because again, as a man, I would never be able to speak to that. But as a counselor, you know the importance of it, but you also know, but I want to love on my baby too. So like,
Yeah.
how do you juggle those things?
Well, for me, so I have a 19-month old. So even getting ready to give birth to him was a conversation because unfortunately, birth is a trauma to the body. And because I had my first daughter, that trauma to the body is what sparked the MS. It was already in my system, it was already dormant, but it sparked it. So having my son, it was a conversation around, okay, what is this going to look like? Because you can't take any medications while you're pregnant. What is it going to look like afterwards? So having to plan what my self-care is going to look like, right? After I have him, 2 months after that, we get back on treatment. While you're not on treatment, these are the things you need to do. Now he's here. Life looks different. We have two. I am a full believer in moving your body, right? Getting those endorphins, get all that stuff moving. I wake up before my family to have that self-care time where I work out, meditate, or whatever, because if I wake up when everybody else wakes up and I don't have a minute to take a breath for myself, I know I'm not going to be a nice person. So I set time in my schedule to take a minute to myself. And I don't feel guilty behind it. My daughter will come and say, "Oh, mom, can I sit with you? Can I work out with you?" You can work out with me, you can sit, but you can't talk to me.
Mm.
And I tell her, it's not because mommy's trying to be mean. I have to take care of myself so I can take care of you. When I put you to bed at night, my shift is over. And she'll laugh. And I said, I don't mean it to be mean. Mommy's going to go take a shower now and take care of herself because it's not just about me taking a shower. For me, water soothes me. For me, water is therapeutic. When my body's not feeling well, I have to get in a warm shower and a warm bathtub. Like I literally have to do that to be able to function for the rest of the day. I schedule self-care days. And my self-care days may be that's the day I go to the doctors. That might be the day where maybe I take myself to lunch. That might be a day where I go hang out with my girlfriends. It might be a day where I sleep in the bed a little longer than I normally do. I have to be intentional and schedule my time. And I make sure that I show this to my children so they understand, especially my daughter. So she understands there's no guilt in taking care of yourself. If you want to go lay down, you go lay down. There's no guilt in sleeping a little bit longer. You want a little bit more ice cream? Grab a little bit more ice cream. That's okay. But understanding where the boundaries are, when it's too much, and when it's enough, and understanding that if it's serving you and it's healthy, there's no guilt behind it.
All right, so I don't know if you can see me on my end, but the video is kind of choppy. Can you hear me at least? Uh-oh, let me stop. So you bring up a question that I have in mind where we talk about the strong black woman moniker that has been placed on women. But for some reason we haven't eliminated out of our culture. Like how do we begin to, you said it, your daughter, you making sure you recognize and putting that in there for yourself, but how do we teach them to integrate it in their lives as they grow, if that makes sense?
I don't want a cape. I don't want to be the strong black woman. I don't want to be a superwoman. I want to just be me. I think once, specifically with my daughter, I teach her to accept her flaws and being okay with that, right? You don't have to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. You do the best that you can. This idea of you have to keep pushing, you have to keep pushing. No, you go lay down and rest. When my daughter is sick, I let her get her iPad and she lays in that bed and she does not move. I bring her everything she needs. Why? Because you need to allow your body time to rest to be the best version of yourself that you want to be. And she wants to get up and go to school and all that and want to run around. I get it. But if you start now at the age thinking I can just push through it, you're going to keep pushing through it, pushing through it, pushing through it till you burn out. So giving them space to understand it's okay to lay down. It's okay to say no, right? If that friend wants to keep borrowing your crayon and you really don't want them to borrow it and you don't like it, tell them no. There's no guilt behind it. How do I tell them no? You tell them, no, this is mine. I can still be your friend, but I don't want to allow you to do that. Helping them understand that their wants and needs are more important than somebody else's wants and needs. It may sound bad, it may sound selfish, it's not. But if you don't put yourself first, nobody else will. I want her to understand that taking care of yourself and doing the things you want to do for yourself are vital. That way, when you get into a relationship with whoever you get into a relationship with, you don't accept the mediocre and you don't allow them to push you past your needs and you don't allow them to violate your boundaries.
No, I love that. And speaking strictly to boundaries, I know you have and I want to make sure I don't mispronounce the self-love of the soul coming up. Now, I don't I'm trying to figure out when this will air and come out, but I want the people to, check out the event. So maybe I'll air it the same week of the event. What can people what was your thought process behind creating the event? It's a webinar, and then what do you hope people will receive? So whether if they see this before or after, like, what do you hope people will receive from the event?
Well, I'm hoping they receive a better understanding of the importance of loving yourself, right? How can you care for something if you don't love it, right? You get a brand new car, 2020 Mercedes. It's going to last longer. Why? Because you care for it. You got a 1998 Buick, you might not care for it, so it's not going to really last, right? If you don't really like it, you're not going to take care of it. You can't care for yourself if you don't love yourself. So, in order to love ourselves, we have to understand who we are, right? Who are you as far as how you communicate to other people? Why do you communicate in the way that you communicate? Why don't you communicate in a certain kind of way? Why don't you set boundaries? Do you have shame? Do you have guilt? Do you even understand what makes you tick? So, understanding who you are before we even get to caring for ourselves. You can't care for something if you don't understand it and you don't love it first. So, I'm hoping people walk away with a better understanding of, oh, this is who I am, and accepting who they are and learning to love themselves as they begin this journey. It's just like when you're losing weight, right? You may not like the way you are looking now, but accepting who you are in this moment so you can get to where you need to be. Accept yourself for who you are, begin loving yourself in this moment so you can begin to learn how to optimize and have optimal self care.
You're you have the podcast out. Talk to me about what the people can expect when they listen to this podcast. I know that they or tell them the title of it and what they'll receive.
So, Selfcare Warrior podcast, this is our second season. We're getting ready to go into. You can plan to get a whole bunch. So, this season, we're talking about understanding teens and mental health. We're talking about Christianity. We are talking about motherhood and guilt. We're taught this podcast is really the intersectionality of mental health and self-care. And people will say, how is there intersectionality? Because if your mental health is not appropriately where it needs to be, you can't take care of yourself, right? If our teens aren't where they need to be from an appropriate standpoint, mental health wise, they can't take care of themselves, and we can't teach them to take care of themselves. Motherhood and guilt. Oftentimes, new mothers that have guilt and struggle with an emotional standpoint when they're a new mother, if they have postpartum depression, they can't take care of themselves. So, understanding how mental illness can impact self care or how self care can impact mental illness, there's an intersectionality, and we're going to get all up in there.
And I know also that you have and I'm looking for your private practice, Holy Street Counseling. You said congratulations, you said you was able to make it a full-time practice. Talk about that journey for a little bit.
Oh man, yeah. I was working in community behavioral health for about 4 years. I was the clinical director for a behavioral health program in Philadelphia and loved it.
Mm.
Absolutely loved it. But I had just recently had my son, and it wasn't even the stressors of being a second time mom. It was the amount of stress that was happening because of COVID. We didn't have a lot of people working. The workload was ridiculous. I was finding myself struggling emotionally, trying to figure out, is this baby blues? Is this postpartum or is this work stress? And I was doing everything I could to try to alleviate it. But it was like every time I would get on a call, every time I would hear that do 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 from Microsoft Outlook, it was almost like a trauma response. I was like, oh my God. Ah. And then I really had to take a step back and say, you're not happy. You are not serving the people at your job anymore because you're not happy. And when I tell you, Reggie, I put every system in place to try to fix things and I saw it was not fixable.
Mm.
I was like, okay, let me take a step back. And then when my supervisor said to me, she said, Kresence, something seems off. What's going on? And I told her, the amount of workload we're having to deal with. This is COVID. We don't have as many people, this, that, and the third. She said, well, we're all stressed. There's nothing we can really do about it. It was in that moment, I was like, I'm out.
Mm.
I'm out. I can't do anything more for you. You can't do anything more for me. And if I'm sitting here stretching myself thin, and I'm mentally starting to struggle, I have nothing to give to my children. I have
Mm.
nothing to give to my people in my practice. Hell, I have nothing to give to myself. And I'm not going to do that. And I knew that God had a calling for me. I knew that what he had for me was bigger than what I was doing. And that was no disrespect to where I was working. I loved my agency, but I loved me more. So I created a plan, a financial plan, started to write down things from a budget standpoint, what I needed to let go of, what I needed to bring in, what I needed as far as bringing clientele in, and all those things, and projected what my numbers would be. And once I came up with my plan, even though it's not foolproof, right? Because when you work in a service based industry, one week you might have all your clients, and next week you might have five of your clients. It is what it is. But I started to save up a little bit, started to make my plan, and I gave him my resignation letter. I said, I gotta go. I was suffering way too much. And I'm sitting here saying, how are you gonna tell your clients how to do these things and you struggling? You got to be the example. So yeah, I pulled away a little over a year ago, and I'm not gonna say I'll never look back because you never know what the future holds. But I'm so happy, so much happier. I get to pick and choose when I work. I'm more available for my children. My son gets to stay home with mommy during the day. I'm available for my family when they need me. I'm available for myself when I want to take time off. I don't have to ask for permission. It's mine, and I get to run it the way I want to run it. Of course, according to whatever the regulations are, but it's mine.
On top of that, and again, she got her hand in so many different elements of like podcasting, just being able to put on events and give off information. She's running her practice. She's doing a lot of things in there, as well as an author, correct?
Yes, I am. I'm going to be releasing a second edition to my book in the next 2-3 weeks. So look out for that too. I'm super excited about that version.
Tell me about the book and what inspired it and what you hope the readers get from it.
So the book is called Balance. It is talking about understanding how to balance your life in your current state of affairs, right? Especially with COVID. So it's a journal. It's about 15 days of journaling prompts. So we start at the beginning, right? We started beginning with self-love, understanding who you are, what makes you tick, why should you love yourself, then understanding what the word care means, understanding what how shame and guilt, like I said before, how that impacts you. We talk about boundaries. We talk about different CBT methods to assist you with automatic negative thoughts, which we call ants. Where are these automatic negative thoughts coming from? Are these distortions reality based? We touch on so many different psychological theories and practices that by the time you're done with this book, you're gonna be like, oh my God, your head's gonna spin, but in a good way. It's empowering. There are quotes from famous women in there, Brene Brown, Oprah, Beyonce, to name a few. There are exercises at the end of each journal entry. So there are yoga sequences. There are exercises talking about the different areas of wellness, financial, emotional, physical, all of that. We talk about ways to align with another woman and bring another woman in on this journey. And I had already created the book years ago, but after I had my son, I was inspired to kind of not zhuzh it up, but redo it. After I had my son, I remember going to the water. I told you water for me is really important, whether it's on my body or visually. And I stood at the water and I kept hearing the word emerging. And I said, okay, God, I'm emerging. But what am I emerging to? And I went to turn away and he said, emerged. And I said, oh, I'm there.
Mm.
And I didn't know what there looked like, but I was there. But looking back on it, I was at a place where I had grown into my womanhood because I thought I was a woman. I thought I was grown. I'm grown. I'm grown. I wasn't grown. I was a little girl pretending to be grown. It was in that moment, it was, you're a woman. Boss up. Do what you have to do. Heal from your childhood trauma. Stop allowing things to hold you back. Rewrite that book and make it better than what it was before. Because the first version was the young lady that you were before. The second version is for the women. And I'm so proud of it.
And I don't know, that might be the title of the podcast, Emerging into Womanhood. As
Oh,
I
I
think
like
about
that.
um, but I don't know, it's that I feel like, and you can pull apart whatever statement that I'm about to make because I'm speaking from an outsider's perspective and not the insiders. It's always this notion of like women don't want to work together or whatever the case may be, or I don't like this girl because she catty or whatever the case may be. And I feel like emerging into womanhood, again, I'm an outsider looking in, emerging into womanhood is evolving into sisterhood because then y'all work together. You get what I mean? But talk about that and that notion of like that. Like, I know I am grown, and or I don't really deal with girls because they be catty. Like, just talk about that, perspective. Again, I'm an outsider. I'm gonna keep making that disclaimer that I'm an outsider looking into it.
as I emerged into this journey of womanhood, I had to really start to look at my environment, and not so much my home environment in the physical sense, right? The literal sense, environment. Who are you around? What are you listening to? Who are you following on social media? Where are these ideas coming from? I lost a few people that I thought were friends,
Mm.
and they probably were friends, but where I was going in my life, it wasn't working out. And I had to deal with the grief behind losing those relationships because they were preventing me from going into the woman that I was. I had to kind of understand, why are you like this? You need to go to therapy. I went back to therapy. I had to, and when I say went back, yes, I've been to therapy before. Therapists have therapists. We have to. How else are we gonna deal with everybody else's stuff if we not processing it on our with our own therapist? Um, for me, understanding, do you like your hair this way because your husband likes it that way? Or do you want your hair this way because you like it that way? It was a whole rediscovery and a cleansing. I stopped following certain people on social media. I think I did, as I was rewriting the book, I did a 25-day social media cleanse because it was too much. It was sensory overload. It was too many ideas of, you should be this as a woman, you should be that as a woman, and you can't do this as a woman, you can't be friends with this woman. Well, why? Why do we have to be catty? Do we have to be catty? Are we naturally catty, or are we catty because society tells us we have to be catty? And what does that look like? Kresence, did you let go of these friendships because you're catty? No, I let go of these friendships because it's about quality, not quantity, right? Sometimes we are friends with people out of obligation, and you don't have to be obligated to be friends with anybody, but it doesn't mean you can't be friendly. We can work together as women. We definitely can. But in order to work together with another woman, stand side by side, you have to be confident in who you are. And sometimes we feel threatened by other women because we see them doing better, or we think they look better, they have something that we don't have, and we want it. If that girl got on a pair of sneakers and they're cute, sis, where you get those sneakers from? Those are cute. I am comfortable enough in my womanhood. I'm confident enough in my womanhood to compliment you and then ask you so I can look as good as you. I'm
Mm.
not going to feel threatened by it. I'm going to be inspired by it. And that's what a confident woman does. That's how we as women can work together confidently, from a holistic standpoint, confidently, socially, emotionally, financially, just from love, not from hate, just from love and loving ourselves. We have to love ourselves first.
I was taught as a man you stay out of woman's business, so I'm glad you was able to like part that information. I'm sure some young lady or some another woman that's in her healing journey is appreciated that, and so I'm glad you was able to offer that. As we begin to close out again, because I want to be respectful of your time. What do you feel like we should add to the conversation around mental health in the Black community? Because I like to challenge the therapist. They see a lot of people saying healing things, so it's like, all right, well, you give us the deeper stuff so that way we can, get away from the noise. So, what is something that we need to add to the conversation around healing and mental health in the Black community?
And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to put your guard down and ask for help. It's okay to say, this doesn't feel right. It's okay to be okay, not okay. Basically, we put on this facade as Black people to be strong and we do. We have to. Whether you grew up in the hood or you grew up in the suburbs, just being a Black person, period, we have to have a level of strength that other people don't have to have. But in that strength, we have to be able to have the humility to say, I'm not okay, and not feel guilty behind it. Those ideals from our grandmother, grandfather, great grand, you just grit and bear it. And sometimes you have to grit and bear it, but sometimes you don't, and that's okay too. So, Black people, it is okay to be okay. Therapy is not for white people, therapy is for all of us. And if you're not comfortable going to a therapist that doesn't look like you, there are so many resources out here to find somebody that looks like you. And even if you find somebody that looks like you, you're not obligated to stay with that person. Just because they look like you doesn't mean they'll be for you. There are so many of us out here that want to help, but we have to start from just saying, I'm not okay.
Mm. Do you have, well, you probably just gave them, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you have any closing remarks that you want to leave with the people?
Closing remarks. Remember that your feelings impact your thoughts, and your thoughts impact your behaviors. Change your feelings, change your mindset, change your way of life.
That's it. That's all. Make sure y'all share this episode with somebody because I want to get all the, views and highlights to what everything that Crescent has going on because we have to uplift it. So share the clip, share something from share a quote, information from this podcast and this conversation because it's a needed and it's an added value to our community as far as healing. And make sure y'all leave a review on Apple, Spotify, and all those different things. And last but not least, remember that this platform has never been about being a replacement to therapy. It's an alternative place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.